Hi, everybody. Welcome to Privacy Podcast. I'm Ben Schiller from Maiden, and we have a special guest joining us today, and that's Eli from StarkWare. He's the CEO and founder, and I would say one of the godfathers of ZK, and a particular technology called Starks, which actually Maiden is based upon. So we're very glad to have him on the show today. Welcome.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me.
And Eli actually has a book out that he wrote with a partner at StarkWare that's all about ZK proofs. So we're going to ask him about that, and also some of the developments at StarkWare, and then also the kind of takeoff in privacy generally that we've seen in the market. I want to ask you definitely about that. So just talk about this book. Why did you want to write a book about ZK? I mean, it's not the kind of most household topic, but obviously you wanted to get it out there and get people knowing about it. Why should people know about ZK as a technology, do you think?
I think it's a very important technology, and it's one that complements blockchain in a very natural way. Blockchain is a technology for authenticity, for trust, for integrity, and it works in a certain way that makes it quite limited in its scale and privacy. And ZK is another technology for authenticity, trust, integrity that builds on top of a blockchain and expands and improves in terms of agency, scalability, and privacy. So I wanted to tell the story about how this relates to people so that people are more educated about it, not the math or cryptography of it, but like its implications to our day-to-day lives.
Right. And you make a good statement in the beginning of the book, looking at the internet in historical terms, and you're saying that really the internet is really only, if we compare it to electricity in the late 1880s, we're really at that kind of first stage of electricity in terms of internet development. And that's partly because we haven't had this combination of the internet and blockchain and ZK working together. Can you just unpack that, why ZK kind of completes the internet in your mind?
Yeah, because the internet is very good for broadcasting information, but when it comes to things that require trust, things that involve, let's say, money or our reputation or who we are, right now, because basically bits are bits, and it's very easy to impersonate and say things even before the age of AI, but now even more so. Because of all of these things, it is important to create some level or layer of integrity, trust, authenticity on top of the internet that is digital and global, like the internet, but lets us basically be sources of authority and own our life in a true way, much as we do in our physical world outside of the internet. We do not require third parties to tell others who we are or to establish our reputation. But digitally, right now, we rely on central parties to stamp and approve what we're doing. And, we can do better. And blockchain and ZK are the tools that let you do better.
So, I mean, how are we actually seeing blockchain and ZK be fastened onto the existing internet to bring about this reality that you want to see or that you see is happening? I mean, do you see this as an inevitable process whereby we adopt this kind of new layer of trust on the internet, or is it something that's still very much in a fight about?
I see this as technological capabilities that will bring, differences or value to humans. I see this as technology that is in the service of people, empowering them, giving them a place to basically ground their own, reputation, finances, ownership, life. So it is technology in service of people, just like the internet is that for information and communication.
Right. But how do you see these technologies coming about in reality? Because I mean, isn't one of the problems that we have that companies want to safeguard their own information? They want this role as intermediaries on the internet because it's valuable to them. This data is valuable. So how do we build this kind of public system of trust that you talk about in the book if we're kind of ganged up against these other forces of more private information?
It is a huge challenge, and I think a lot of the reason that blockchain is being challenged is exactly by the traditional way of doing business that is, or it's not even the traditional, but it's the prevalent way in the digital age before blockchains, which is that you do rely on these central parties and they just become stronger and stronger with time. So how do you counter that? First of all, it is an uphill battle and very hard. What Maiden is doing, what we're doing here with Starknet are all part of this bigger effort to rebalance and to make people more empowered in the face of these centralized entities. So I think the way it's probably going to play out is that regulatory and financial friction is going to keep on increasing on the centralized platforms, just as it has been over the past 50 years of digital the digital economy. And there is going to be stuff that can be best built or only built or fastest built on blockchain just because it's not as regulated, and it's just, you can build stuff in its place where if you have an idea, you can just implement it. And, Polymarket is just the latest example of such a thing. But we'll see more of these things. Basically, I think that's going to be the way forward, that the new functionalities that people have not thought of will emerge on top of blockchain. And this is the way it's going to disrupt and overcome the traditional world in the end.
All right, so your background is very much as an academic, and the world of blockchain and crypto is kind of filled with academics who've gone from, research to building a company, but they haven't all been as successful as StarkWare. Do you have any advice for academics who trying to make that transition, and why do you think you've been successful where others haven't maybe been successful?
Yeah, I have a few pieces of advice to academics who want to go into entrepreneurship in general. There are some things that make an academic very well suited to be an entrepreneur, like vision, deep understanding of the space, pedigree helps a lot. Also grit. Academics are usually people who have a lot of grit and, sort of run marathons intellectually and in their work. Those things make you very well suited to be an entrepreneur. Some of the things you probably have to ditch as you're going into this world is, first of all, you need to talk a lot to people, maybe a lot more than, in the academic world, usually if you have an idea, you want to keep it to yourself until you publish it. With business, it's probably the opposite. You want to talk to people as much as you can in order to, make things discover what succeeds. Another thing is that with academics, you're usually striving for something that is barely possible and in the most outrageous form, and try to do that. Well, in business, it should be the exact opposite. You want something that is almost trivial to do, just you have some little moat or something that is new that others can't, and focus on that. So yeah, I think those are the big differences. Talking a lot, thinking about MVP, minimal viable product, as opposed to most impressive, far-reaching thing you can think of.
So we've seen a big explosion around privacy, and companies talking about privacy, particularly as institutions have been talking about going on chain. They've discussed the importance of privacy. How have you watched that debate from afar? Being in the industry a long time and seeing particularly the growth of Zcash last year, which was something you were very much involved with. I mean, how did that seem to you from the outside, going from being something that was quite niche-y to being quite mainstream? And Zcash was one of the most important assets last year in terms of performance. What did that look like to you?
Yeah, so, Ben, I co-founded Zcash. It's based on a white paper that 6 co-authors and I wrote, which basically is about how to use ZK snarks in order to create privacy for Bitcoin. But we ended up co-founding a company and launching a separate chain that is Zcash. For the first 12 years, it was pretty brutal, meaning, the token price and the funding for the organization weren't that great. But in the past year, it has suddenly surged, which is very comforting to see. I'm not involved in the day-to-day operations anymore. I used to be a bit more involved in the early days, but I have been, very fond of the project, very supportive of it. I love the people there. I think they're visionaries. And, we talked about grit, how important it is. So just think about, working for a decade or more in a world that doesn't really value this particular thing. And now there's recognition for it. So, I see a lot of validation in that. I think that privacy is extremely important. And I think it's great that Zcash now receives the place that it should. I feel a lot of similarity with the other project that I co-founded, which is StarkWare and Starknet. The token was launched more recently, about I think 2.5 years ago. And also, just like Zcash in the early days, it's been mostly down. And, this notion of grit and working hard with vision and understanding that adoption for something that is as fundamental as infrastructure takes a lot of time is something that I definitely align with, believe in, and, have the stamina and grit for it. I think something similar is the case of Maiden, another project that I have a lot of respect for. Bobbin and you guys, I think, are doing amazing progress. On this front, Starknet just released a privacy layer called Stark BTC, and Stark 20 is coming soon, which I think is a very interesting innovation on top of the protocol that is Zcash, because it basically allows for very good composability and very good UX with privacy. And I think that's very interesting.
A lot of people would say that the UX is a bit of a problem, or has been a problem for privacy in the past. How does your new product address that?
The most important aspect is that the UX for it is going to be very good. The way we achieve it is that basically we introduce operators. The model in which this particular layer works is a little bit more similar to the way that Web 2 works, where, if you are using a financial application, Venmo or some bank application, then you are communicating by some encrypted channel with another party, and, they give you privacy. So in the model we're using, you have operators. These are going to be various dApp providers, wallets, stuff like that. You basically communicate with them. They are the ones that generate the ZK proofs for your transactions and submit them on chain. This, on the one hand, in terms of privacy, so yes, the operators do get to see more as opposed to what we did with Zcash. But on the other hand, they can now offer you a service. First of all, you do not need to generate on your smartphone or laptop a ZK Stark proof. They take care of that. So you get much faster response time. Another aspect of it is that now you can have composability with good UX among various DeFi protocols, all from the same application. And it seems to you just like the standard transparent way of doing blockchain, but everything is now shielded. So we picked a different point in the sort of privacy versus usability spectrum, but we think it's the right one for a lot of users.
Sorry, can you just unpack that a little bit? So basically you can bring privacy to different parts of this value chain, right? So you're choosing a particular part of that value chain to provide the privacy, and you're taking the load off the user to provide their own ZK proof?
Yeah, well, we can compare it to Zcash, right? So in Zcash, if I generate a shielded transaction, first of all, it's limited to transfers. I can transfer Zcash to you, but in a private or a shielded way. But I can't do DeFi, I cannot do swaps, I can't do, if I want to do that, I need to sort of unshield and lose all of my shielding, and the UX becomes a nightmare. Another aspect is when I'm sending a transaction in a shielded way to you, I need to generate the proof on my smartphone or my laptop, which takes a lot of time. And the third aspect is that if you open your shielded wallet, something like Zashi, and you want to know if you received any funds, you're going to need to scan through the latest blocks. This could take, minutes or something like that, or sometimes hours, depending on when you last open it, in order to check if you received anything. So all of this leads to very problematic UX, right? It gives you very good privacy, but very problematic UX. It's very cumbersome. It's not fun to do DeFi with this. And you lose all of your shielding effects when you try to do DeFi, because you need to unshield, do a bunch of transparent things, then go shield again. Okay, so a lot of bad UX and a lot of loss of privacy. What do we do in Starknet? The generation of the ZK Stark proofs is not on your phone or end device. It is done by an operator. Okay, so first of all, in terms of response times, you don't have that issue. Okay, you don't see this effect. Another thing is that because the operator gets your transactions in the open, right? This operator, let's say a wallet provider, can offer you more DeFi services that all of them will be shielded by basically gluing together many different shielded transactions that you don't notice as a user. You just get, let's say, a shielded swap. That's what you'll see on your end device. But what will happen behind the scenes is the operator will create the relevant shielded transactions, process them together, create a proof for them. So you get good UX, good composability, and good privacy. That's basically the approach we took with Stark BTC and Stark 20.
How do you see the argument for privacy progressing? There's been a lot of interest in the market about bringing institutions on chain, and said that privacy is a prerequisite for doing that. Do you agree with that statement? Or because it seems like when you talk about the book, I was interested when you talked about zero knowledge, you were talking more about this notion of integrity web rather than, say, the kind of privacy web. So I was wondering how you see the difference between integrity and privacy, and whether you see privacy as a prerequisite for institutional adoption.
Institutional adoption of some of the assets, like, giving you an ETF to Bitcoin, or giving you an ETF to hold Zcash or Ethereum or STRK, the Starknet token, you don't need privacy for that. And that's already happening. But that's not really adopting the technology. That's adopting the asset class. And that's, to me, as a technologist, less interesting. I don't think blockchain is about creating tokens that rise in value. I think that's only a means to an end, or a side effect. The real thing is about changing the way we conduct business, we own our life in the digital world. That is what Bitcoin unleashed. Bitcoin did not unleash, or I don't think Satoshi, he writes this, he didn't intend to create a new asset class, something you can invest and hold. He wanted to find a way for any two parties to transact without a third party intermediating that. If that is to become adopted by businesses and companies and people all over the world, it's clear to me that privacy is a must, right? You cannot have salaries being paid. At StarkWare, salaries of myself and others are paid on Starknet. And it is a big challenge for my CFO to do this in a privacy-preserving manner. By the way, we are building, one of the first products we're going to be building with privacy is something, we want to eat our own dog food. So we will be using privacy-preserving payment processing and salary processing for ourselves, because right now this situation is unacceptable where, people can track how many salaries are being sent and, what is the average pay and stuff like that. So we're going to solve this problem. I think as more companies do similar things and want to do their payrolls on-chain and transact more on-chain, yes, then privacy will become important.
That's interesting. So at the moment, everyone can see what everyone's paid at StarkWare?
You have to use the browser a bit and Google and try to understand. There are various mitigations that my CFO is using, and we're limiting it to only parts of the salary. But by and large, it is a problem, right? And we're gonna be able to move to full salary payment for anyone who wants, in a more natural way once we have privacy. Right now, we're doing a little bit of weird obfuscation, which isn't ideal, but we're going to solve this problem for ourselves and hopefully for others who want to use it in a similar way.
So how do you see this notion of integrity? Or you have this, in the book, you talked about a contrast between Las Vegas, where nothing counts, where it's kind of this free for all, and you kind of play around and nobody's counting, and this new world of a blockchain where everything is recorded. But we still need this privacy in order for people to trust the integrity land transactions. So how is privacy downstream from integrity, or are they the same layer of things?
Well, integrity means that, everyone knows that the right thing is being done, even when no one is watching. So everything about proofs is about integrity, and blockchain is only about integrity. We know that the right thing is being done when no one is watching. Now, we would like to have integrity at scale and with privacy. In order to get integrity at scale and with privacy, right? In order for you to know that I'm doing the right thing, even when you're not watching, and even if you try, you cannot find out, my passport number, my identity. That's where you need ZK. So ZK is a means to an end. The end is integrity, but you want to assert your integrity in a way that preserves your privacy and can do so at scale. ZK is the tool that gives you that. It gives you integrity at scale and with privacy. I want to explain it a little bit more. It's very easy for me to convince you of my integrity in the Bitcoin style. I basically tell you, Ben, look, I'll show you everything I'm doing, and you're going to check every step of it. You can see for yourself that everything is done okay. This is how Bitcoin operates today, or Ethereum for that matter. Each and every transaction is inspected by everyone, and they all agree that the right thing is being done. But this doesn't scale, and you lose your privacy. ZK allows you to get the same level of integrity so that everyone knows that you've done the right thing, even when they were not watching, but without needing to inspect and see everything you're doing, without the transparency.
All right, so I just wanted to go back to Zcash again. Sorry. Do you feel that the run-up in Zcash last year was because people were becoming more interested in privacy, or that it became a bit of a kind of meme stock or meme asset? How do you kind of think about that? The kind of the asset price.
I think it's both.
Going all over the place, and the kind of underlying privacy.
I think it's both. And it's not a bad thing. So I think people are appreciating that privacy is important. And then based on this, they're basically, I guess, investing in what is the Schelling point for privacy, and that is Zcash. So it's this anticipation and recognition that privacy is really important, and then looking for things that align with that. And Zcash is benefiting from that. Starknet is benefiting from that. I believe Maiden should be benefiting from that, and other things that are aligned with privacy.
I mean, do you see, this has long been a kind of question in crypto about like asset prices reflecting what is happening in the underlying kind of infrastructure industry. It seems to me there's been a kind of greater decoupling between what's happening in the institution and infrastructure space and what's happening in the markets. Do you see a divergence in those kind of worlds now?
You know what? I don't know. Crypto has always been this very mysterious market for me. I think the way I explain crypto to myself is that it's crypto by and large does not yet have product market fit. If you compare it to AI, everyone's using AI. Everyone, my mother, my friends, everyone's using AI. It is not the same with crypto. Not everyone is using crypto. Okay. At the same time, there's a lot of anticipation that I agree with that crypto will be extremely important in the economy. It will even replace parts of the economy. And the third part is that there are ways to invest in crypto even today. So the combination of these three things, no product market fit yet, a lot of anticipation, investable things, creates this weird market where, there's a lot of anticipation that is translated into speculation. A lot of stuff things are being talked about. And then, you see action related to that. At the same time, on the regulatory front now with the Clarity Act and, the Genius Act and things like that, on the adoption side, on the integration of Rails, there's constant progress.
There's constant progress. I mean, it's very noticeable going to, when it was at Consensus last week or 2 weeks ago, and it was very much a financial markets conference now, was nothing really about token launches or token issuers. There was no kind of flamboyance on the floor anymore. It was very much about institutional adoption and building the financial rails of the future. Do you think the kind of flamboyance of the crypto industry has gone, and we're now in this kind of new era of much more serious infrastructure building?
I would say that we're just in a winter and there'll be some summer and the flamboyance is going to come back and then probably go again because it's a very cyclical market. And the infrastructure building, you guys at Maiden, us at Starknet, others, it's continuing unfazed, So markets be markets, and then, we keep building. Builders be builders, market be markets.
All right, so just give us a sense of the next few months with StarkWare. What's on your roadmap? You're building Stark BTC.
Yeah, so we just launched Stark BTC, which is the first way to shield your Bitcoin. You can also do DeFi with it. You can generate yield on it. You can, stake it in a shielded way. So there's a lot of exciting new stuff that you can do with privacy for Bitcoin today. Coming up next will be other ERC20 tokens. We call them Stark 20s, where again, you can have this shielded form of ERC20s, where you can also compose and do DeFi, all with very good UX. So that's very exciting. And then behind the scenes, there's this ability to generate proofs. Anyone can run blocks and process blocks of Starknet and then generate proofs of that on-chain. And basically, Starknet is going to update its state according to that. So all of this thing is very exciting. It's all novel. The first composable DeFi privacy, the first, shielded Bitcoin with yield, the first ability to generate blocks and then prove them and affect changes in a blockchain. All of this is new and very, very exciting.
What are the ERC20s that you're going to be integrating?
Oh, all of them. So all ERC20s on Starknet, you can press a button and shield them. So, Ethereum, wrapped Solana, wrapped Bitcoin, wrapped Zcash, wrapped anything that you can bridge over, and you can bridge any ERC20 from Ethereum. And there are a bunch of other things, as I said, like Zcash, Bitcoin, Solana, and a few other assets you can then shield and unshield and compose in a variety of ways.
So just one final question. So looking forward to the future, how do you think ZK will be part of our everyday lives in, say, 5 years' time? Can you give us one blue sky thought?
In 5 years' time, I think it will be a little bit like the way we treat this, SSH on or in our applications, which is it will just be there. We won't notice it at all, but it will be protecting us. So whenever we go and pay online these days, you see this sort of little lock sign or green lock sign on your browser. If you notice it, most of us don't notice it anymore. What's happening behind the scenes is that our browser has created a secure SSH channel with the website we're transacting on, and all of it is sort of abstracted away from us. I think ZK will be a similar thing. We will expect this privacy. It will be prevalent everywhere we transact on a blockchain, and we will maybe notice some, UI image of it being there, but we won't need to bother about it, which is exactly what we're trying to do already with the STRK20s and Stark BTC, but there's still a way to go till this becomes the standard.
So you're expecting it to become more prevalent, but maybe less noticeable in our everyday lives. It won't be sort of, ZK this, ZK that. It'll be sort of underneath the hood.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Eli. And we look forward to seeing what you produce in the future in ZK and with StarkWare.
Thank you. And I'm excited to see what you produce next. I heard you have a new play, right?
That's right. Yeah. Bitcoin Bad Boy. It's coming out in October in New York City. So if you're there, please come along.
Is it going to be what? Broadway, off Broadway, off?
I think they call it off Broadway. It's 100 seats, which is the cutoff.
Okay.
For off-Broadway.
I'm going to reach out.
It's on 36th Street, right by Madison Square.
Very nice.
Great. Thank you.
Congrats.
All right, that was Eli from StarkWare. I'm Ben Schiller from Maiden, and this is the Privacy Podcast, and thanks for watching.
Thank you, Ben.